Enjoying the humid, balmy weather?
Yeah.
I'm from Northern California, so I'm freezing my ass off. I want to thank everybody for coming. I told them we should be in the big room, but see, we proved it that we should be in the big room.
Come on.
Just so you know, we're doing some technological housekeeping here as far as the slides go, but that's not going to stop us. I did want to do a few housekeeping things first, which is, first of all, how many people here work in the game industry right now? Okay, I don't know what the hell you're doing here, but okay. You must have misread the panel description. Okay. So second of all, how many people have been to this panel before? Okay, so I don't know what y'all are doing wrong. Try it again to get going. Okay, so while we work on this, what I want to do is I'd love for our panelists to introduce themselves, and we can kind of go from there. So we've done this before, so we kind of know what we're doing. Very honored to have Amanda Grow with us today, as all of them, but especially Amanda, who is the selectman for Norwich, or dictator of Massachusetts or something. But also I've known for a long time in the game industry. So please, go ahead.
Hi everyone. As Rich said, my name is Amanda Grow. In my day job, though, I am the producer for Dungeons & Dragons Online with the Legendary Games Company. And then in my after hours, I'm an elected official in a local town.
Cool.
I've been in the industry, this will be my 17th year.
Wow.
Wow, we have to talk about how long we've been doing it.
Every time I talk about it, I feel like this. Indiana Jones, where the guy drinks from the wrong company. He's like, I'm in life force. It's like that.
I'm Linda Carlson. I am a director of business development for a services company called Arise Gaming. We do customer support, moderation, QA, all of that sort of stuff. But I've been in the game industry for about 20 years too, so it's important to know that there are adjacent jobs to the game industry. Yeah. I was head of community relations for Sony Online Entertainment, and then Triumph Worlds, and then as an independent consultant for a lot of different companies, in which I learned that there is such immense variety in this industry, and I'm very happy to be here. Over to you, Tramel.
All right. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, Tramel Ray Isaac. I am a chief art officer at a yet to be announced game studio, so don't ask.
You know, Spence got the name of the company on his LinkedIn now, you know?
He does not, does he? What happens, man? Can't trust nobody. So still yet to be unannounced. Been in the industry for 30 years. So
wow.
I'm looking at most of y'all probably before you was born. Sadly enough. This old man knows nothing. Been in the art industry, just kind of in the game industry, doing art from animation to UI to VFX to modeling, texturing, the whole shebang. So I've seen the whole evolution of the game industry from, sprites to now. So good to be here.
And my name is Rich Weil. I'm the CXO for Mod Squad, which I've been doing for 15 years. We work primarily with a lot of game companies. Prior to that, I was at Cartoon Network Gaming and then NCSoft Gaming before that. And so we've been doing this panel for a long time. We've seen a lot of different changes in the game industry as we've been doing it. And I'm always very grateful to have such an experienced, knowledgeable panelists, because we can tell you how things really are. While we're continuing to work on some of the technical issues, I thought we might address the elephant in the room as far as the game industry goes. And that is, as I'm sure...
There's a couple.
Yeah.
Couple elephants.
But as you know, the game industry has gone through tons of changes. Over the last year, a lot of layoffs, a lot of acquisition, consolidation, which of course affects jobs for good or bad. And there's just a lot going on right now. So I thought the first thing we could do is to kind of talk about that a little bit. And I'd like to ask the panelists, why do you think what happened has happened, and where do you think over the next year or 2 years the game industry
actually saw it coming. So in COVID, when COVID hit, everybody went home, right? People actually didn't really work to offset the lack of production. Many of the larger companies started hiring people. And because other larger companies started hiring people as well, it became a bidding war. People started asking for a lot more than they were worth. And let's just straight up be honest with you. People were getting, double their salary, their normal salary at the time, to go to a certain company. So a lot of hopscotching happened during that time. So people would be there for 8 months and then would go somewhere else and make 50 grand more and then go somewhere else. And it happened across the industry. So companies like Amazon and Microsoft and Sony, they all did the exact same thing. Come ship time, you gotta ship a product. Now you got a burn rate that's over, $5 million a month, and the game you shipped didn't do well. So the end result of that is get rid of the dead weight. So, and that's basically what happened. And it's a cascade effect. So if publishers lose money, third-party developers take the brunt. So third-party developers ended up shutting down because publishers were like, well, we don't have funds to do this, shut it down. So and it's just basically everybody else is feeling the ripple effects from all of the bigger companies doing goofy stuff.
I would concur with almost all of that statement, and you could have an entire panel on just that topic.
Oh,
So
almost all of it. Let's get to the part that you don't agree with.
People don't agree with him completely.
Oh, it's
I
so
just
bad.
laid facts down.
Those are all facts, but I do also think that there was, with everybody at home playing games, there was also this bubble of a lot of extra income that came in for already live games. And some studios, I think, bet too much on that cycle. And then when COVID lifted and we discovered that there is an outdoors, and that we can go back to work, and go to the park or whatever, then, the uptake slowed, and they weren't prepared for that either. And that's the only thing I'd add, because the rest of yours was a brilliant thesis, and that's why I'm in awe of you. Oh my God, no beat down today, good. What I would say is that, because I see a lot of this, on my LinkedIn, every time I see a job, I try to repost it for all the many people that I know that are out. What I've seen though is that with the smaller companies, and I'll let Amanda talk about Standing Stone, they didn't shut down, and they're doing okay because they didn't overplay their hand. But with all of those layoffs, a lot of those veteran people left and they still had some money. So now they're coming back and they're starting new studios. And they're bringing the band back together and hiring new people. And they already know how to ship a product to market. They know how to get there. So now there's a resurgence of some very original titles and some new technology as well. And over to Amanda.
Sure. And I absolutely agree, especially one of the things that I was noticing in sort of the mid-tier range was places that you had this sort of windfall as everybody was sort of trapped inside and had nowhere to go, no outlet. A lot of them turned to gaming, where there was still a community and you could actually engage with people instead of just the four walls of the room that you were in for months and months. And when that happened, on the business side, people saw revenues go up. They're like, wow, everybody's in, look how high our MAU is, this is great. And so then they took that windfall and said, yeah, let's reinvest it. And depending on how they reinvested that windfall, it really impacted whether or not they then on the backside, as everyone went back out into society, if they could still sustain that staffing level. And so if your money goes up from nothing that you did, then it's not necessarily a good idea to load a bunch of people behind that, because you can't correlate that revenue is going to come from those new people that are aboard. So that was really tough. Are we getting all right? So,
yeah.
but on the other, I will tell you another aspect of it is risk. People underestimate how much of the games industry is driven by investment. So if investors are experiencing things out in the economic environment that makes them sort of close the wallet because they're anxious about getting returns, then that also tends to hit us, because people forget if you're doing a new project, you still have to pay those workers that are working on the ideation, that are working on the prototyping, like they need to get paid. So they will often turn to investment. And so if investors are saying, I'm not feeling that right now, then you'll start to have a lot of impact from that.
And Rich is going to cut me off, but I'm going to speak really, really fast on this one. 90% of the investors do not care about the employees at all. All they're looking at is their profit coming in on a month-over-month basis. If they're not seeing that profit, they will cut you off at the knees.
Some of them don't even do games.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
For the record, I know better than to try to cut you off. It's because I will not succeed, so fine. I'm resigned to it at this point. But yeah, I think that another thing that's kind of been overlooked, and I absolutely agree about kind of the chaos that the pandemic causes kind of coming home to roost in a way. But I also think acquisitions and consolidation have had a big effect on certainly like the job market impact for the game industry. I mean, you look at the big ones, Embracer Group for one, of course, Microsoft with the whole Activision Blizzard thing. There's been countless smaller ones. From my perspective, like my company, we provide customer support and community relations services to other companies, and a lot of different kinds of companies, but game companies are a big part of that. And we have done so much over the years with medium-sized, what I would call medium-sized companies. They've got a couple of, medium-sized games. I would have turned, before they were bought by Tencent, which was another person doing a lot of acquisition over the last few years, I would have classified Riot Games as a medium-sized company because they had one big game, right? So they didn't have a whole studio of big games. They had one big game. I'm not trying to rag on anybody. I'm saying that's how I would look at it, right? And now you're just not seeing that much of that anymore. So once you have consolidation, you should have, not that everybody does this, you should have economies of scale, right? So a centralized QA group, a centralized support group, a centralized legal team, for example. So, and so that lowers, it's supposed to be more efficient, right? So I think that has had an effect as well. Can we have the next slide, please? Thank you. As many people have noted, there are a lot of different paths into the game industry. The game industry needs every kind of job that every other company needs, plus some. So I'd love for the panelists to discuss kind of what they feel some of the best ways of getting into the industry are, and some of the best entry points. Tramel, would you like to start?
I don't know nothing about nothing else up there except art. So, yeah, it's just within art itself, there's a lot of different ways. So it's like tech art, just environment art, character art, UI, VFX, animation, tech animation. So the list goes on. There's a lot of ways that you can get in as an artist in the industry. One of the things that just as we're starting to talk about like the industry in itself and how it's changing, there is a very small window in which people need to take seriously and operate within before things get out of hand. And I'm talking about AI stuff. So it's futile to push against it because it's not going to stop. So that train has left the station and it's going 1,000 miles an hour. The only thing you can do as an artist is to adopt ways to utilize the tools that have changed, probably less in our favor as far as like manual work goes, but more in our favor when it comes to automation and expansion of your abilities. But if you don't know those tools, it's going to be a lot harder for you to get in. So like, being an artist now is not about just knowing how to animate or how to draw. It's also about knowing how to draw and how to use AI to expand your abilities beyond what you currently have. AI is not, at this point in time, is not a choice. It's pretty much part of what you have to be as a user. As an artist, you have to be using AI to augment what you've already been already learned in school.
All right, so Rich is going to learn very quickly that this entire panel is going to run away with this and completely ignore his slides.
What else is new?
But because that is the other elephant in the
every-
room, is AI, right? And I completely agree. You cannot ignore it, no better than you could ignore the advent of cell phones or something as simple as a calculator. Those became big back when I was still in school and we were forbidden to bring them in. But I mean, everything can become a tool. People who used to do laundry by hand, they were put out of work when washing machines came in. Are we going to go back in time? Hell no. And it is important, so I'll just talk a little bit about it. I'm in community management, and so therefore, everything's about communications. So the two tools that I would use the most are Grammarly, which prevents me from looking like an idiot when I'm typing up something too quickly and have to put it out there. But it's not always right. Sometimes it doesn't understand context, so you can't rely on it. ChatGPT and all of the various types of AI writing out there, they're interesting. I would not rely on them. They're fine for low-level stuff, but at a job that I will not mention, my boss loved AI, and he loved writing blogs. So he'd put some ideas in, and this thing would spit out a blog, and then he'd go and post it. And it's like, oh, wonderful, he gets lots of things. And one morning I woke up, and this blog was up there with egregious factual errors. Because you cannot rely on AI to pick that out. They're just going to put in imaginary stuff. Anything they find on the internet, they're going to jam in there. So use it, but be extremely cautious, and there's no substitute for a human in some cases. In community management, a huge job, a low-level entry job is moderation. That's going to be done by AI very, very quickly. But you don't want to become, I hope nobody here is from Facebook, because Facebook keeps taking my posts down for really stupid reasons, and you can't contact anybody there to find out what the hell it was, because they're relying altogether too much on AI.
YouTube.
But AI is brilliant for moderation because it takes out the trash and leaves the important decisions and, more importantly, the engagement opportunities, the two-way conversations. That's what your community managers are doing now, instead of going through posts looking for the word Nazi. I mean, that's easy to do. Amanda, your turn.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Automated moderation improves, like the main improvement when I was doing communities. I've held a lot of different kinds of roles over the years, and so much of your time would get spent, like you say, hunting for the naughty word, instead of doing the real community management, which is engaging with the fans, seeing what they're excited about, bringing their feedback back to the development team, going back and forth. You wouldn't get as much time to do that stuff because you were busy. I got to clean up all this spam, or I got to clean up all these things. So that would be nice. In terms of getting in, I find that one of the big rules for me, and something that's competitive against AI even, is being demonstrative about what is it that you do or skills that you have that would make that product or that studio better. In my case, I got brought in, and this has been years ago, but I got brought in, no degree, no games experience, because what they saw was I was super active in the community, and I was organizing events, and I was doing all this stuff that was essentially community management, but I was just doing it for funsies. I just really liked the game. And they were like, can you come do that for us? So, think about, what are you doing? What skills do you already have? How could you apply those across to a game? So let's say that you're doing a customer service job right now to make ends meet. We often need people that have that level of compassion to interact with fans that are having problems with transactions. Or if we're doing a trade show like this here at PAX, we need people that can talk to people at the show floor and go, hey, come learn about our game. So those types of skills are very transferable, but you might not think of it because you think games industry and you're like, okay, first thought level designer, or first thought artist. Like, no, there are many, many, many skills that apply to getting these games to run, getting these games to look and feel and act the way they do, and providing the experience, especially for multiplayer games. So don't just narrow yourself into one or two columns. There's a variety of things you could be doing.
And you can transfer between them easily.
Yeah.
You'll get to know the people in your company. They'll give you a chance. Sorry, I said I would.
No, that's great. Right? Because I've done producer, I've done QA, I've done community, I've done what else have I done over there? Product management, and I've done it across multiple titles over the years. So you definitely can flex and flow where the passion takes you.
Yeah, I think one of the important points is that no matter, like, if you want to work in the game industry, a again, the game industry needs what every other company needs. If you're an accountant, game industry has accountants. You know, lawyers, game industry has lawyers, right? So there's lots of different ways to get in, AI or no AI. Wayne, my personal view on AI is either it's going to do everything and then everybody gets a universal basic income, because otherwise there's nobody has any money to buy anything, so everything burns down. So it's either UBI or the Holocaust. So that's fine. So I just don't even pay attention much to it because I'm old. But I did forget a logistical point about this these panels. So we're doing this panel. We're going to break in between. So we're going from 4:30, 5:30. We're going to break in between, but in that break we're going to be taking questions. But if you want to get up, we're not going to clear the hall. Get up, go to the bathroom, whatever. I'm going to. So and then 6 to 7 is the second panel about career development in the game industry. So I forgot to mention that. I apologize. I was distracted. So okay. So next. There we go. The important point of any endeavor is starting, like where you start and how you start. So just as with anything else, there's a lot of different ways to plan for personal initiative to explore game industry careers, and there's lots of different ways to do it, and there's lots of things you should be doing before you start, instead of just like spamming out your resume to everybody. So I'd like to ask the panelists to maybe share your experience of how you got into the game industry, and how people can some of the best ways to plan in advance to start that process. We'll start with Amanda.
Sure. So I mentioned it a little bit earlier. Essentially, I'd played games many years, and then there was a particular MMO that I happen to be working on still now that I really liked. I just really liked this game, and so I was doing all these extracurricular activities around the community of the game. I was doing like trivia contests and all kinds of stuff. And I was being very visible in places where the company was able to see me, because back in the day, people used to like forums. Now everybody's on social, but back in the day, the forums were the place to be. And so I was there, and I was always creating this positive, culture that was about growing the community. It wasn't just about me going, how I hadn't thought. I was like, no, we're going to do things that make people want to bring more people into this game. And that was the element that they were looking for. They were looking for people that understood not just how to have fun, but how do you get this game to extend and bring in even more people? And so they just had reached out to me coincidentally around the same time that I reached out to them, because one night I'm running one of these trivia contests. A friend of mine came over and I said, sorry, I can't do dinner. I'm busy doing this thing. He's like, explain what you're doing. And I was like, well, I'd explain it. And he says, Amanda, you realize that they pay people to do that, right? And I was like, what? Because this is like back in community, it was sort of a young career. And I was like, what are you talking about? He said, yeah, they actually pay people to go in and run events and do all the stuff that you're describing. So I was like, I never thought about that before. Because at the time I was working for the credit bureau, right? I wasn't working for anything related to that. And I went onto the website and looked, and sure enough, they actually had not one but 2 roles open for community engagement at the time. So I reached out to them, and then right around that same time, they had started reaching out to me because I had separately run a big study. I basically spent, maybe 40 hours just studying the players and putting out a guide for how to pick your server. And they were like, ooh, yeah, no, we want that. And that has nothing to do with, making dungeons or any of that. That was expressly about the management of the fans. So that was my foothold, and was through that.
I think most of us are here because we love games, right? We want to be a part of that. We want to be part of the tribe that makes these games that have made our lives so wonderful over the years. And I've been gaming since D&D first came out when I was about 14 years old. That was about 120 years ago. Oh, really? I must have started earlier. Yeah, anyway. No, seriously, because I bought the first edition of D&D when it was still photocopied and mailed in a big envelope. So I guess I was 10 or 12 at the time. when I started really getting into gaming, I met my husband in EverQuest, right? Moved to Florida to be with him, and then had to wait for my green card. So I really couldn't do anything. So I started doing a lot of volunteering. I became a volunteer guide in EverQuest, and did basically free customer service work. But it was fun, and it was highly educational, and I felt like I was helping people. So that was brilliant. Once I got my green card, I got into games journalism. I love writing. I love writing about games. It pays for shit. But they sent me to conventions. Woo-hoo! I love cosplaying, so I started cosplaying because I am an introvert's introvert and I couldn't go in my real form. But if you put on a proper beard and all this armor that you learn to make yourself, you can get away with almost anything. And so I did that a lot too, and I started going to the Sony online conventions because that was the suite of games that I loved the most, and also because I was a volunteer, they needed people to help run that. Prima Guides got interested in my writing work, and they hired me to write a lot of their guides. I'm also an artist, and could never make a living at art because mortgage people don't take that sort of thing seriously, but I love doing cartography. So I started doing all sorts of maps for a lot of different games, and those were published through Prima Guides. And then I started writing for a gaming magazine, and after 2 years and them owing me $10,000, they shut down. So I'm posting on Facebook. I said, well, if anyone's looking for a proper dwarf, I'll shine your shoes, I'll do whatever you need. And the phone rings, and it's like, hi, I'm John Smedley, and I'd like you to come work for us. And my reaction is, oh, fuck off, who are you really? I thought for sure that it was just somebody pulling my leg, but no, it was Smed. And I said, well, look, I've interviewed, and this is important for later, I interviewed at Sony twice, right? One for a game design position, which I did not get. Once for a community management position, which I also did not get. Because I wanted too much money, because I'm a grown-ass adult. I'm not working for minimum wage. But Smed said, and I quote, how much do you need to move out here? And the rest is history. I have never looked back, and I've made it part of my job to help other people looking to get into the industry, because a lot of it is incidents and accidents and doing what you can to put yourself into a position to be noticed and become important to everybody in the room.
That's amazing. I personally did not shine any shoes. I owe it to the brothers. I don't know. I think my journey into the game industry was a little bit of luck and a lot of hard work. I didn't do nearly as much hustling as that, but I went to school for animation, and when I graduated, I continued. I actually didn't get a job in the game industry for about a year. But that time that I was out of school, worked on my portfolio, continued to build it up. And the only reason I got a call was because I was prepared for the job, but at the same time, they had hired another animator from my school the year before. And because he was good at what he was doing and he worked out, they decided to go back to the school and see if there were any recent graduates that they would recommend, and my name came up. So that was kind of it. I got in because somebody else was good. There you go. Boom. But, after I got in, that's when the hard work starts. Just through pretty much my whole life into, making games and the art of making games. And that's how you sustain 30 years, by just, doing whatever you possibly could to, make things happen. So that was kind of my way in.
I think one of the consistent things here is a lot of people get into the industry through avenues they know, as far as like people they know, or games they know, companies they know, that kind of thing, right? It was the same thing with me. Just very briefly, I was 23 years old. I was an HR director at a software consultancy in Austin. I loved playing Ultima Online. I'd met a lot of friends playing UO who had then gone over to NCSoft. So I knew a bunch of people at NCSoft. I had known them by playing with them and hanging out in Austin with them. And they were hiring somebody to run their community teams. And they had 2 internal candidates. And half the company hated one internal candidate, and half the company hated the other internal candidate. And I was the only one that none of them knew. So at the end of the day, they were like, well, let's hire the HR guy. He probably can't do too much damage, right? And so that's what happened. They were wrong about not causing damage, but yeah. So I mean, so it can be very fortuitous. But I think a lot of stories of how I got into the game industry come from being in the right place at the right time. But the way that you do that is by kind of putting yourself out there and getting involved before you have a job. So anyway, moving on. So this kind of leads to that, which is it's very crucial to be able to build a network and to build a group of contacts that you can learn more from. I mean, I think that's a big part of it is learning about the industry through friends or contacts or associates or mentors or whatever you want to call it. So, I'd like to ask the panel, what are some of the best practices with that? Like as far as essentially networking and building a presence or something you can stand on as you're going for game industry jobs. And I'd like to start with Tramel.
It's pretty straightforward. Like I was just thinking about it while you was talking. I think I've only really gotten one job by myself. Everything else was because I knew somebody, or somebody hooked me up with somebody else and connected me with somebody. So I would say it's extremely important to make those connections. And how do you do that? You go to shows like this, and you talk to people. Sometimes you gotta actually talk to people, and be out there and put yourself out there. I know it's hard to do. You gotta go up and say hi and say words and stuff. It's rough, but yeah, you gotta be outgoing, and you gotta make those connections. So I just got back from GDC, and the majority of my time there was going to sessions, and then in between sessions, oh man, I ain't seen you in a long time. Hey man, what's going on? Just connecting with people that I haven't seen in years, and reinforcing those connections. So you got to get on posting stuff on LinkedIn or ArtStation, to get yourself discovered. Because I do a lot of scrolling through ArtStation to find contractors or even possibly people to hire. But if you don't have that presence, then you won't get that opportunity. So yeah, I would say make sure you stay as visible as possible on LinkedIn, Twitter, or X, or whatever. And you never know, somebody just might find you.
All right, I'll agree that social media is very important. It's also very important to remember that what has been seen on social media cannot be unseen. If you've got questionable stuff on your social media, you better start scrubbing that up now, because you will be judged. LinkedIn is currently the default for anybody in an HR role. So unless you are getting recommended to a role through your direct contacts, that's where the HR professionals are going to go. Build out your LinkedIn. Make sure that you post on there regularly. Respond to posts that are made by people in companies or in roles that you are interested in, because it's going to get you seen. People like to get feedback on their stuff. They're going to make a post and they go, oh, I hope somebody likes this. And so if you're liking it and commenting on it, that raises your visibility. The online portfolio, I think, is a very, very good tool, because it's so easy to just have a QR code on a business card. And as you're talking to somebody, oh, maybe you could look at my portfolio because it's right there. And it's a call to action, and they'll feel bad if they don't scan it right now. So use that guilt against you. And also, who here is an introvert? Oh, yeah. So it used to be my job to organize the Sony Fanfare for SME Lives. And every year we'd have a pep talk with a lot of the devs who were deeply introverted, and they did not want to go to this thing, and they did not want to have to talk to the players. But the secret is, they're just as scared of you as you are of them. We're all the same. It's the same proportion of introverted geeks. They're just Also, some of the best conversations I've ever had is just a random one. You're getting a coffee or something, you're standing in line, you start a conversation. Turns out they're a producer for a fantastic game, and then you feel like maybe imposter syndrome even standing there. But that's how conversations start, and most people like to connect. People like to be seen, heard, acknowledged. And There's a lady from Dreamhaven who was here at the last panel we did, and she says, in order to really be appreciated by the person you're talking to, be interested in them. Be interested in their company. Ask questions. Don't make it all about yourself, because being interested makes you interesting. I've never forgotten that, just from Dreamhaven.
Absolutely. You know, and for folks that are more introverted, you're going to have a lot easier time with this than you would say, like, you know, when I went to the credit bureau, going into the credit bureau, you go to try to get small talk, and you're like, so how about that behavioral economics? I don't know, what do you like? And you're like, I like Dungeons and Dragons, right? But in this industry, if I say, I like Dungeons and Dragons, everybody's like, oh yeah, me too, oh yeah, I've been playing since first edition, blah, 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 and we'll immediately go down the rabbit hole. You're not gonna get that in other sectors, right? If I go to like a financial firm, you know, fingers crossed, hope I can find another person in this entire place that plays games. And that's not the case here. Like, that's one of my favorite things is all of my coworkers, like almost every single one of them, if I mention any game, they're like, oh yeah, I've heard of that. And so you're coming in with an advantage because the people that you're talking with like similar stuff to you already. It's going to be easier to strike that up. So totally lean into that. Places like PAX, other trade shows in the country, you know, coming to panels like this is where you're going to be able to find those social connections, because sometimes you're in line getting some food, you look at the back of somebody's shirt and you're like, hey, cool shirt. And they're like, oh, thanks. And then as you strike up a conversation, it turns out that person works on the title. You wouldn't have known it necessarily. Because again, we're all the same, we all look like, hey, yeah, gamer's awesome. So definitely don't be afraid to talk, because you're gonna have more in common with these folks. And definitely, you know, be in places where you can be seen, you know, following different groups that focus on the craft of making games, right? Like, that's a great place. Or if you have a program in your school where you can try to network that way, a lot of those schools in the Boston region have internships with some of the game companies in the area. It's another great way. So there's tons of different ways to make those connections. But I gotta agree that a majority of the time, even my non-gaming jobs, a huge part of it was friend of a friend of a friend heard that there was a role open and then was able to help me, you know, get in and meet some people, get introduced, and then go from there.
So job one, guilt us all into accepting the connection on LinkedIn.
So this is one more way. It's like when you're at school, like all those people that you're, you know, in class with or graduating with, stay in touch with those people.
Absolutely.
Because you never know, like when somebody might get a job and, you know about another job that's not posted, and you get the scoop on it. So just, you know, stay in contact with your classmates and, you know, make friends with them and, you know, keep it going like that.
Since I have well and truly lost control of the arc of this panel,
You invited us.
We'll try and salvage here. So we've been talking about networking and stuff like that, which, you know, was part of this slide, but that's okay.
It's reading your mind.
I've resigned to it. So what I would like to talk about is more, you know, we talked about kind of in-person network, but I'm sure a lot of people here would be interested in some of the different types of organizations, professional organizations that exist, not only just for people in the game industry, but for people who are external to the game industry as well. So we'll start with Linda.
Oh, sure, great. I will put a plug out there right now for one of the best orgs in the business, which is the IGDA. That's the International Game Developers Association. Almost every major city has a branch. They get together for game jams. They get together just for social nights, you know, go have a beer and go have a coffee and talk about games. And there are a lot of young people just getting into the industry, which is great, because you should be making a game right now. And if you're an audio guy, you're gonna find a gal who does narrative design. You're gonna find somebody else who actually does the programming, which, you know, you need to actually build your game, and you can get together with those people. It is a really great networking org, and a lot of us old fogies belong to it as well. So it's another way to get connected, because we come hang out at these events too. We love being social. So again, that's the IGDA. I highly recommend it.
Tramel? There's no art organization?
Man, I'm sure it is. I don't know about them. Look like a nerd to you? Come on up. I got shit to do. No, I mean, Linda, sure. Right. I do want to say one thing, though. I see a lot of sleepyheads out here. Come on, man.
It's late. They've been drinking all day.
I know. This cat's been sleeping the whole time. Wake that dude up. I see you. Dozing off and shit. Came all the way from California for this.
Amanda?
So around here, there's what they call the Boston FIG, the Festival of Indie Games. If you're looking for people that are doing small projects and they need a little help and they're sort of gathering people up, or they're doing demos, or even if you have your own products that you're like, look, I'm going to do this little experimental thing just to see what's possible. I think that's a really good way to do it. And then I totally agree with Linda. And then honestly, I've always been a huge fan of trade shows. Things like PAX, or PAX East, PAX West, Dragon Con. Comic-Con's a little tougher. Gen Con was actually a really big one for me, for anybody that likes D&D. Like, that's like the place to be, right? The trade shows often have those of us that are either we're doing panels or we're demoing product, or on the floor, but oftentimes we're out there recruiting too. So I find it to be a ripe place to find, because they're consistent. They tend to always happen every year. Timing each year is very consistent as well. And you can, again, they tend to form communities. It's a good place to go in when they say, hey, so-and-so is going to be at a panel, and then you can go and be commenting. And, I think it's another kind of overlooked opportunity.
I'll also say that a lot of shows, like what I consider the industry shows or the professional shows, whatever you want to call them, like GDC, they'll have special passes for students or something like that. So you can get in, you can see the expo. There's recruiting booths there, and other countries also have their own like game organizations. Like I deal a lot with the Australian one. It's called IGEA. And it's their game industry association, and they like to develop, young people who are interested in getting into the business too. So all kinds of things like that. So moving on real quick. There we go. So we talked a lot about networking and LinkedIn and all that kind of stuff, but there's still a lot to be done with some of the old tried and true ways. Certainly. Lawyers, doctors, and HR people are some of the most, Luddite people on the planet when it comes to, doing things new ways and adopting new technologies. I know because my dad was a lawyer, and in 2005 he was mad that he had to put his files on the computer. So I'd like to ask the panel about some best practices with regards to cover letters and resumes, because you are going to have them. And we'll start with Amanda.
Sure. Big one I always do is do cover letters matter? And when I was really young, I was like, this just feels like a rote procedure. We both know why I'm here. I'm here to get the job. But as I got older, what I found out, especially as I started hiring people, what the cover letter is for is I have a stack of resumes, and I can look at what you specifically did, but the cover letter is your opportunity to provide a little more context for me for why you think what you've done, what your skills are, etc., are so relevant to my particular company, my particular product, or that particular role. It's not just like an introduction. It's about saying, why, yes, I have worked and done these things, and this is why that's relevant to you and why I'll be a good fit. So definitely don't blow off the cover letter. I actually like getting cover letters, but also don't be too verbose, right? Try to keep it, a single-page cover letter.
No 5-page essays.
Say again?
No 5-page essays.
Yeah, no 5 pages. And it's only just a byproduct of a lack of time, right? Like we only get so much time when you've got like 20 people to get through. You're like, well, I don't have a 300-page novel in my schedule this week. So definitely the one-page cover, but the purpose is, this is how I'm going to relate to your company.
Linda?
Okay, so we talked a little bit about AI before, and when you have 300 people applying for one job, AI is going to be brought to bear. HR departments are using it, and they're going to scan your cover letter and your resume. So, number one, make sure that it's proofread well so that you don't have any spelling errors. And that should be obvious, and yet I still see resumes and cover letters with terrible writing. Use Grammarly, get your friends to read it over, whatever. But the important thing is you need a different cover letter and a different resume for every job you're applying for with every different company. And my favorite tip that I learned from HR is go to the job description that you've seen posted, get a highlighter out, pick out the important words in there, make sure that those words are reflected in your resume and cover letter. Because when they throw it through the AI scanning shredding machine, it's a multi-purpose thing, it's going to pick out the ones that don't match those criteria. And you might not even like the words that are in there. So if they use something like synergy, stick it in your resume. I put a job description, I'm putting it in there because I want them to notice it. And that's gaming the system. We're all gamers. I think that's totally legit. Tramel. Oh, and link your portfolio. God damn it. But get that in there. It's so important.
Yeah, exactly. I guess I'm a little weird about cover letters. I don't like them. And that's just me. And I'm not saying that's an industry standard. I don't think they're very important, especially when it comes to art, because for me, it's all about what you can do, not what you can write. Like, I don't really care about your dog or I like surfing. Like, oh, cool. So, like, making art. Like, come on. And just resumes in general, just, you know, like Linda was saying, just make them very specific to the company that you're applying for. And definitely, for sure, if I have to look for a link to your portfolio on the resume, it's just, I'm throwing it away. Because I ended up getting like 100 in a day, and then now I got to sort through and then try to contact you. Hey man, you got a link? It's just a waste of time. So make sure it's complete. Make sure it's as factual as it possibly can. Because if you're making grandiose statements on your resume, it will get found out in the interview process. And nobody likes a liar, and nobody likes to be found out in an interview because you're wasting people's time. But yeah, the cover letters for me, not so much important. The most important thing, and resumes at the end of the day really doesn't matter, because the problem with that is, like, on environment teams, like large scale teams, like everybody pitches in. Like, rarely do you get to say, I've made this whole environment by myself. So when you do have things on your portfolio and it's just an environment, like 9 times out of 10, the only thing you did in there was that chair over in the corner or a handful of props. So, like, even when you're saying, oh, I worked at, there's a lot of contractors that work at Naughty Dog, but you have Naughty Dog on your resume, but when you dig into it, it's like you really didn't do anything. It's like, did you bring anything special to Naughty Dog? No, I did some props. So I was like, well, just talk about the props. So be very specific on what you did in the resume, and definitely make sure that the link is there.
Okay. Well, you alluded to this a little bit, Tramel, about interviews, like backing up what you have on your resume in an interview. So obviously that's a really important part of this whole process, whether it's something that's in person or nowadays more and more, or Zoom calls, of course. So what are some of the best practices for game industry interviews? And like when you interview somebody, or when you've had interviews yourself, what have you noticed as far as good things to do and bad things to do? And so Tramel, since you were just talking about it, we'll start with you.
Yeah, during the interview, for sure, know exactly what you're talking about. Be very specific in what your contribution to whatever scene that you have in your portfolio, and be able to talk to it in specifics. There's been plenty of times in interviews where I'm like, hey, tell me about this piece. And they throw out these general statements about, we did blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm not interviewing your team, I'm interviewing you, and I want to know exactly what you did. So it's been a couple times where I would ask that question, they would evade it, somebody else would ask the same question, they would evade it, and basically it's like, all right, no go. So be able to talk about what you did and talk about that process and how you got to the end result. Because at the end of the day, as being an art director, for me, is, I need to find out how much you did versus how much you were directed to do. So that's a little nuance there, because it could take you 5 weeks to get to what you have in your portfolio because someone told you all the things to do along the way, or you took 5 weeks on your own to do it. So I want to know exactly what you did. So just be specific, be ready to talk about your process and your tools, and make sure that you're speaking about the latest and greatest things that are out there if you're using those, because, you know, like I said earlier, times are changing, and if you're not on the cutting edge of these things, you could get left behind.
Linda?
I think the most important line is do your homework. Make sure you know what games the company makes. Make sure you know what programming languages they use if you're getting into programming. Make sure that you can speak to what you know is important to the company. And this means researching them. That's not just going to their website. That's going to LinkedIn or Facebook or X, wherever it is. Find out people who are in positions in the department you're applying to. Find out what they're talking about. Find out what they're interested in, because they will tell you over time what they're looking for in your company just by what they're posting. And knowing that in advance is great. Some of the worst interviews I've ever had is when the people come in and they go, so yeah, I want to work here, and what games do you make? It's like, next.
Another thing that's kind of a new area to watch out for is so many more places are doing interviews remotely than they used to. It used to be when I interviewed, they actually flew me out from Ohio, right? And I'd be there in person, I'd be there for a day. They'd gone
Free hotel room.
free hotel room, gone through, and then fly you back. Now they just call you up on a little Zoom or Teams call now. And so when that happens, you're applying for what most people consider to be highly technical roles. Like no matter what the role is in gaming, it's involving technology. So you better make sure that your connection to that video call does not telegraph that you are not tech savvy. Right? So make sure that you have a good connection. If you're applying for an online game and you have a really terrible internet, it's like, wait, what? Make sure that you're visible. You don't quite have to take it to influencer level where you've got like a bright camera and all that.
Ring light.
But you need to be able to be seen. Like you don't want to be like in the dark. Don't be doing it from I had somebody once that tried to do the interview on the phone in their car while they were clearly doing something else. Don't multitask your interview. Like, don't do that. Even though you can, you could have the second screen going or whatever. Don't do that. Like, stay focused on that interview. Even though it's digital, you better treat it as though you were in person. And then sound quality, make sure that you've got something good so that your sound is coming through. Test your sound, try calling a friend just to get any sort of, if they're stuttering, or my voice goes into a robot mode because our connection's getting weak. Figure out what those problems are ahead of the interview, not during the interview, because it's kind of like the next layer of people would judge you if you were wearing certain clothes in an in-person interview. Well, now they're going to be judging you based on some of these peripheral things that happen when you're doing a digital interview.
And the good thing is that pants are optional.
Just don't stand up.
Definitely testing is important, as well as just doing a run-through. Have a friend grill you, whether it's in person or over Zoom, depending on whatever the interview is, right? Practice. Practice is important. And also, a certain degree of confidence is important. There's a difference between confidence and arrogance. I have interviewed many people when I would pose problems to them. Okay, so if you had this job and this came up, how would you handle it? Oh, I don't know. If you don't think you can do the job, why are you interviewing for the damn job? So it's important to understand the job. You don't have to know all the nitty-gritty details, but you have to have the confidence that you can do it, because that's what they want. One of the things that comes up a lot that I see with people wanting to get into the game industry is they want to get into the game industry and they want the game industry to teach them how to make games. The game industry, as many illustrious panelists have said on this panel over the years, the game industry does not have time for that, and they're not in the business of doing that. They need people to help them make games, not vice versa. So anyway, we'll move on real quick. We'll do this next one real quick, and then we're going to move to some questions and kind of do the mid-break thing, and then we'll start the other one at 6. So, so you did the interview. It's super important. To me, this is, as long as you don't completely screw up the interview, this is one of the most important things of the process, is how you follow up. So I'd like to ask the panelists what they feel like are some of the best practices in that, and what do you do afterwards? And we'll start with Amanda.
So good is to, you can always send a contact out to say, thank you so much for the interview, really appreciate the opportunity. Don't belabor it. Don't, go super stalker mode on it, right? Like where you've already done the interview and I'm going to poke them every 5 minutes. Hey. Like that doesn't work. That doesn't work. So that's one thing for sure that you should do is, just the polite, really thanks for your time. Make sure that you've had accurate contact information. Like I cannot stress that enough. Sometimes somebody would, give us a resume, they got the contact info on there, and then we go to follow up later, and then they've changed it. So if you're planning on changing it, like be sure to make sure that people know.
Linda?
Oh, I get to go next. Okay. Be prepared to get no. No is a legitimate answer, and it's no judgment against you. It's just the way it is. You're not going to get the job most of the time, but at one point you will get the job, so never give up hope. And I'm going to keep it really short because I want Tramel to talk about the fact that you're also interviewing the company and you have a decision to make. Over to you, sir.
Well, I guess you chose what I have to talk about now. So
I gave you extra time so you can add that.
So what Linda said, it is important for you to be aware of where you're going. And that means doing your own research. That happens prior to the interview, hopefully. And after the fact that if you get... bottom line is, the company's going to do research on you. They're going to find out who you are as best they possibly can. Most people do background checks and all that other stuff. And if you've been in the industry a couple of years, maybe they'll call some of your old employers or teammates if they know them. I always check up on people that I hire. So if you did some dirt, I'm going to find out about it. But afterwards, I think the bottom line is, like, be patient and keep it moving. So, like, don't put all of your energy into the one interview. I mean, go interview at multiple places and just let the process happen. Because, the bottom line is most likely, like, it says on the thing, ghosting happens. They're probably not going to call you if they don't want you. So just be prepared to just not hear back. And if you do hear back from them, then great. Be ready to talk about salary requirements and negotiations.
I do think it's very important to send a follow-up. Others have mentioned that. You send a short follow-up email, really enjoyed it. If there was something that stood out in the interview that was a positive moment, it's always fun to bring up in a reminder kind of way. And then my personal philosophy is I get one more shot at it, right? I'll do the thank you after a couple of weeks, one more shot at it, then, as far as like, hey, have you heard anything kind of thing. That's really out of spite more than anything else, though. Just for me to say, I know you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, and if you're an HR person who's supposed to be telling people no and you don't have the guts for it, you're a freaking coward. So, and I want you to know that I know. So that's what my second, hi, how you doing, email is for. But yeah.
This is always the case, though. Like, so, perfect example. This week and, like, last week, it's like GDC and now PAX. I got a bunch of resumes sitting somewhere. I haven't contacted any of those people. I actually was in the middle of an interview and was supposed to schedule one for this week, but I didn't because I was traveling. So, like, you got to know, like, the time frame in which you're operating in as well. So, like, if it's, convention season, which is like, PAX, GDC, what it used to
Comic-Con.
be, Gamescom on the back end, PAX West. Like, if you're doing Gamescom, PAX West, in that time frame, the decision makers may not be even in the building. So
And
you got to understand when.
Another thing you can do towards the end is you can specifically ask them around how long do you think it'll take before you have your decision made. Because then even if you don't hear back from them, if they say, well, we think we're going to pick someone in the next 2 months, and 2 months goes by and you're getting crickets, they probably moved on. But I also want to stress another thing to not do. Do not burn bridges. This industry, we all cross-talk. So some of us, even when we're working at competing companies, somebody will apply and it'll be like, hey, Amanda, what was your experience like working with that person? I remember you worked with them, 3 games ago. How were they? And so we were always cross-talking. So even if you think you got ghosted, or even if you think, the HR person was whatever, do not burn your bridges, because I've had times where people that I've passed on in the first round, like I hired somebody completely different, time passes, and I go, you know what? I have another role open on that department. I really liked that person. They were my runner-up person. Let's see if they're still interested, and I'll come back to them.
Okay, so we're gonna take a quick break, take some questions during the break. Is the mic, okay, so the mic's good. So if y'all want to ask some questions, we're gonna do this really informally, and we're sitting down and starting the next one.